Before his transformation into a cyborg, Grievous was born on the world of Kaleesh, and immediately he was destined to be a warrior. During the Kaleesh's war against the Yamri on Huk, the young Grievous would learn battle tactics and how to use weapons, but he also developed a hate for the Galactic Republic, who were siding with the Huk planet. Not only was Grievous envious that the Jedi were able to use the Force, but the Kaleesh's defeat in the Huk War would send Grievous on a warpath of vengeance, and this drew the attention of the Sith. The combined hate for the Jedi and skills as a warrior made Grievous a perfect tool for the Sith in their orchestrated war, and once Grievous started to work for the Intergalactic Banking Clan, the Sith saw Grievous as a subject for their experiments. Having agreed to become a cyborg, Dooku decided to enhance some of his hate for the Jedi and confirm his loyalty to their cause, so deliberately shot down Grievous's ship. Once the Kaleesh awoke, he was suspended in a bacta tank and healing from severe injuries. He was told that the Jedi had been responsible for the attempt on his life. Grievous would spend the rest of his life pursuing both the Jedi who had destroyed his home planet and those responsible for his crash, with Dooku even going as far as modifying his memory. But what if General Grievous learned the truth of his past? Would his loyalties to the Sith change, or would his hate grow stronger? Aboard a Republic light cruiser, General Grievous had been set the task of retrieving a number of High Republic artifacts, and as he looked at the clone checkbox sorting the inventory, he did what he had been created to do. Slicing the clone with a single overhead strike, the cyborg was about to order his Magna Guards to secure the ship, when he spotted one of the artifacts was almost bouncing out of the box. Whilst his mission was merely to retrieve the artifacts, he opened the box with surprising delicacy, and he found a Kaleesh mask. As he examined the bones and teeth, the mind of the cyborg turned from anger to confusion, as it was still in good condition, and he soon realised that it was not from the High Republic era. Closing the box and ordering for the artifacts to be moved, the cyborg was distracted, and soon force pushed by the Jedi and Apri-D, he found himself in an escape pod, tumbling into the debris below. Grievous tried to use the controls, and steering through the remains of the battle over the Kazlin system, the pod soon sustained heavy damage. As the hatch burst open, Grievous latched onto the edge of one of the High Republic era beacons, and to look for transport or way to contact his droid army, he decided to explore the old station. Once serving as a signal for pilots and a multifaceted hub of Jedi life, the beacon was now destroyed in several areas, but Grievous wanted to find more about the Kaleesh artifacts. The cyborg booted one of his clawed feet at the astromechs, and eventually one of the R0 units whirled back into service, and Grievous ordered it to find records of Kaleesh. After several minutes, Grievous was looking at records of the Kaleesh-Huk War, which were automatically updated by the Jedi's database, and he felt pride at the Jedi referring to him as a threat. But what angered him was the omission of the crash caused by the Jedi. Given the transparency of the other reports, it seemed strange to Grievous that his crash had not been noted. Having identified the Kaleesh mask as a symbol of victory from a High Republic era battle, Grievous took a Jedi vector to the world of Scipio, fueled by his quest to know his past. As the droid commander moved to the Outer Rim, one of the IG-100 Magna Guards tasked with moving the Jedi artifacts had somehow managed to survive the failed heist, and even though it only had a head and a torso, it managed to report to Count Dooku of the mission's failure. In his castle in Sereno, Dooku was furious at his cyborg, who had a nasty habit of pursuing trinkets, but on this occasion he sensed something more severe was at play. Perhaps he needed to confirm his loyalty again. Dispatching Ventress to track his potentially wayward commander, the Dathomirian Mirin used the communications between the droid army, and she traced his movements to the Alberio sector. This was unknown to Grievous, who was now descending through the clouds of Scipio, and landing just outside of the fortress to the IGBC's main vault. He was greeted by the person he wanted to see, who was San Hill. Grievous immediately raised the banker into the air, with his claw digging into the collar of Hill's ornate robes, and he'd ordered him to tell him the truth. Through his gradually fading voice, Hill ordered him to be released, as the real footage remained in his personal archives. The cyborg was not convinced, and keeping his claws close to his collection of lightsabers, he toe-poked Hill into the fortress, and after passing several layers of security, he used a large holoprojector and presented footage of the fateful day. As Grievous watched the hooded figure of Count Dooku ordering Hill to kill Grievous, the cyborg felt a burning in his chest, and his gut sac started to burn. As he collapsed to the floor, Hill summoned a medical droid, whilst the Vault guards pursued the assassin, who was the masked Asajj Ventress. The Dathomirian had done what her master had ordered and tracked the cyborg onto Scipio, and when she saw Grievous about to kill the banker, she was told by Dooku to eliminate Grievous. To prevent detection, Ventress had stowed away her unique curved-hilted split sabers and resorted to a pistol, with which she had similar proficiency, and after following Grievous like a shadow, she fired a precise shot into a small gap in the cyborg's armour. Having examined the Vault guards, Ventress knew she could evade them with ease, and as they pursued her in their airspeeders, she easily ducked between the mountain ranges to find her starfighter. Back within the main Vault fortress, Grievous had been transported to the neighbouring planet of Mygeeto, despite protests within the IGBC to let him die. Also controlled by the IGBC, Mygeeto's cold climate was not helping the condition of Grievous, and as he was moved to a secret medical centre, there were still debates on whether they should inform their leaders. It was Clue Lesser who, on behalf of the corrupt Core 5, decided they should keep Grievous's potential survival silent, as not only could they use him to defeat any rivals, but he was also a bargaining chip in any negotiations. So it was Nix Card who later sat in the office of Palpatine, and with the hologram of other separatist leaders, they were wondering who would fill the void left by the towering cyborg. The Sith had been experimenting with the creation of more technological terrors after Grievous, and alongside a greater role in killing Jedi for the Gendai bounty hunter Dirge, there would be a new and improved version of Grievous. After all, the Jedi did not know about the supposed death of the first Grievous. But whilst the latest cyborg was being prepared, the Jedi and the Republic were able to take advantage of his absence, and especially in the Outer Rim, where Grievous had caused heavy losses to their fleets. This did not matter to the real Grievous, who had awoken from his slumber in Mygeeto, and tethered to his medical table, he looked down to examine his injuries. The revelation of the lie kept by Dooku now made the cyborg furious, and the anger which the Sith had harnessed for their cause caused the cyborg to rip through his bindings, and he shattered his ward. Ordering a medical droid and an astromech droid to attach his limbs, every being who stood in his path was brutally mutilated by a combination of his claws and any medical instruments around him. After retrieving his lightsabers from the head office, Grievous stomped out of the building, and before the leaders of the IGBC could examine the damage, Grievous had already left in a station Nemoidian escort shuttle. The cyborg knew that he was not ready to face his traitorous master, but having access to transmissions aboard his shuttle, he discovered the IGBC were planning to use him against their enemies. This was a revelation that could work in his favour, but for now, he planned to exact immediate revenge on Asajj Ventress, who was the one who had just threatened his life. Instead of eliminating her, he first wanted to inflict pain on her sacred Night Sisters, and he still had control of many of the droids in the Outer Rim. Whilst Grievous recalibrated as many droids as he could, the deaths of doctors and scientists on Mygeeto had not gone unnoticed by the citizens and leaders of Mygeeto. When Clue Lesser arrived at the scene of the massacre, the spokesperson for the IGBC knew exactly who had done this, but they had to cover it up to protect their prized asset. So it was news of a freak accident at the medical facility that soon spread to Nix Card and some members of the Senate, but this was suspicious to the Jedi. Though Mygeeto was in separatist territory, the Jedi debated whether or not to intervene, considering the massacre of the civilians, and they ultimately decided to dispatch Ki-Adi-Mundi and Mace Windu to infiltrate the planet. Thanks to Palpatine's intervention, the Jedi allowed easy passage to Mygeeto, and they are even provided with analysis droids to help with the investigation. Once the two Jedi arrive at the entrance to the medical complex, the erratic scorch marks and grazes on the walls, the ceilings and the floors were much too familiar to the Jedi, but why had this been disguised as an accident? Ki-Adi-Mundi thought the answer was obvious, and the General Grievous had shown his displeasure during an operation, but Mace Windu was unsure, and he sensed a shatter point when he examined one of the beds. As the analysis droids completed their scans, the two Jedi received reports of separatist activity in their sector, and they were forced to return to Coruscant, with more questions about Grievous. It was on their journey through hyperspace did the Jedi receive yet more reports of separatist movement, but this time it centered around Grievous slaying a group of Jedi near Pori. As they looked at some of the disturbing footage, they both noticed that Grievous had changed, and many of the features that were already terrifying had now been enhanced to instill an even greater level of fear. The two Jedi Council members thought they now knew why Grievous had gone to Maikito, but the first Grievous was far from Hippori. After gathering as many droids as he could, Grievous initiated his vengeance on Asajj Ventress, so travelled to the world of Dathomir. On the planet itself, Mother Talzin was gazing into a crystal ball placed on a pedestal in her lair, and she soon started to see flickers of a cyborg wielding multiple lightsabers. Most other mortals would see this as an immediate threat, but Talzin said something different about the cyborg, and she ordered the old Daka to prepare the undead in case negotiations went wrong. Two senior Night Sister warriors were ordered to greet the cyborg, and when he arrived in his Providence-class dreadnought, they quickly transmitted a holographic recording of Talzin through the subspace transceiver on their Genevex-class starfighter. Grievous instructed his T-Series tactical droids to await his orders, whilst he discussed matters with Talzin, and when he landed his starfighter, he stomped towards the clan leader with his arms behind his back. As his limbs twitched in anticipation and anger, Talzin could sense Grievous's emotions beneath his robotic exterior, and they were of hate, betrayal and revenge. The Night Sister offered to provide him with the power he desired, in return for protection of their clan, and with his now enemy becoming Dooku and the Jedi, he decided to accept his truce. Talzin's slightly gnarled index finger placed Grievous into a trance, and even though he was barely a Kaleesh, she instructed her witches to cast their magics onto his skeleton. Talzin then proceeded to lead the chants to begin the ritual, and very slowly yet visibly, Grievous's limbs and torso started to strengthen and his mind became even sharper. When he awoke from his trance, his eyes were now glowing, and as he flexed his claws, he could feel his power growing, and he felt better prepared to avenge his crash. But for all of his own intentions, he was now somewhat under the control of Night Sister magics, and Talzin wanted him to go after the one who had stole her child, the one known as Darth Sidious. Grievous barely knew about Darth Sidious, and had only seen and taken orders from him through holographic recordings, but Dooku's fear and reverence of him made the cyborg reluctant to go after him without the assistance of the Night Sisters. Talzin was aware of the power of Sidious, as he had once offered to combine his knowledge of the dark side with the magics of the Night Sisters, so she asked Grievous to find out more about the Sith Lord. Grievous was not used to missions of espionage or subtlety, but still with access to much of the Separatist database, he endeavoured to use this to locate Sidious. Returning to his old fortress on the third moon of Vasek, Grievous found that his traps had not been activated by any visitors, and even his medical droid EVA-4D was still guarding the fortress, so he decided to access his communication area. Searching for any transmissions mentioning Sidious, Grievous rarely heard any mentions of the name, apart from his role as Dooku's master, but during some of his old training sessions, Talzin's taken son Maul was the commonly referenced name. The records show that Maul had died a decade ago on Naboo, slain by the hand of the Jedi who had recently become a nuisance, who was named Obi-Wan Kenobi. When Grievous returned to Dathomir, Talzin revealed that she knew of Maul's survival, but had been unable to locate him, so she gave Grievous a magic-imbued talisman to search for the Zabrak. As Grievous scouted the Outer Rim, Grievous's recent visit to his old fortress had not gone unnoticed, as Count Dooku had discovered the now barren stronghold. Having planned to restore the building for his second version of Grievous, the Sith was surprised to find someone had defeated the traps, and the lack of any fight showed the intruder was someone who knew the fortress. After the security footage failed to reveal the identity of the intruder, Dooku ordered the engineers to double the defences, whilst he began to track the Bel-Balub 22 starfighter last owned by Grievous. Though he could deploy ring-nade reconnaissance droids, the pilot continued to elude him, and now both the Jedi and the Sith were solving a mystery, with the third enemy soon joining the war. The third enemy in the form of Grievous had made swift progress in tracking Maul. With the Talisman of Finding given by Talzin, Grievous discovers clues on the world of Stobar, and accompanied by a portion of his droid army, he dispatched them to search the planet of Lotho Minor. Otherwise known as the home of the Junkers, the world of Lotho Minor was almost inhospitable, owing to its harsh storms and the hazardous environment created by all the debris washed up on its surface. So it was a rather skeptical Grievous who received reports from one of his battle droids that the life scanners had detected activity in one of the tunnels. The cyborg mounted his combat speeder and led the droid to the coordinates as his talisman continued to glow before venturing into the tunnels alone. Using his lightsabers to forge an artificial path, Grievous was unperturbed by all the strange creatures and insectoids, until one spider-looking creature climbed the walls to stare at his face. The years of exile and solitude had turned Maul into a deranged being, with his legs replaced by a mix of whatever junk he could find. Only fueled by his hate for Obi-Wan and Darth Sidious, Grievous realised that he could not interrogate Maul whilst he was in such a state, so he stunned him with an electro-staff and dragged him back to the ship. Returning to Dathomir, Talzin lifted the stunned body of Maul and weaving tendrils of Night Sister magic around his body, the Zabrak screamed in pain as his makeshift legs were ripped apart. Like the transformation to Grievous, Maul was given a stronger lower body, and as the Night Sisters recovered from their exhaustion, Maul awoke to his surroundings. Stretching his new legs, Maul let out a feral scream that sent shockwaves into the Force, and he was now determined for revenge. Like Grievous, Maul had a hatred for Obi-Wan Kenobi, but Talzin wanted them to go after Sidious. Maul believed that Sidious was the only being he could not defeat alone, and they would need much more than just knowledge of the Force to defeat him. Grievous's army would only be able to inflict a scratch in Sidious's machine, so Maul and Grievous begin by travelling to the world of Mustafar, and there they were greeted by Black Sun warriors. Though they were initially reluctant to join the terrifying Maul and Grievous, several flicks of the lightsaber and scattered heads progressed in negotiations, and one of Maul's wanted allies was now secured. The takeover of the Black Sun soon brought about another ally in the form of the Pike Syndicate, who did not wish to meet the fate of some of the Black Sun hierarchy, and this encouraged Maul to take on the Hutt Syndicate. When they arrived on Nal Hutta, the Hutt Council were even less compliant than the Black Sun, and Jabba had not forgotten about the separatist kidnapping of Rota, so ordered his bounty hunters to bring Grievous's skull onto his plate. Though Talzin had warned them that causing violence would draw the attention of others, Maul and Grievous had little choice, and as Jabba watched the carnage, the two warriors disarmed all the occupants in the room and killed the Hutts. Jabba was seemingly unmoved, and this only infuriated the Sith, who threatened to replicate their massacre if Jabba did not relinquish his territory. The Crime Lord knew when to concede defeat, and with more resources to add to Maul and Grievous, they could begin to work on conquering worlds which were outside of Republic or Separatist control. Despite the best efforts of the two former Sith understudies, the deaths of the Grand Hutt Council being reported by Jabba, who wanted to re-establish control of his empire, and now the Jedi were onto the case. With his previous experiences with the Zabrak and the cyborg, Obi-Wan is tasked with finding their intentions, and joined by the Kifar Master Quinlan Vos, the Jedi travel to Nal Hutta. The palace that belonged to Gargiul of the Hutt was not in good condition by the time the Jedi arrived, and as Vos began to use his psychometry, both on the floor and any objects that had not been destroyed, Obi-Wan saw some of the callous strikes on the bodies. Obi-Wan didn't need anyone to tell him that these were Maul's victims, and the reality dawned on him that Maul had survived on Naboo. Vos continued to track the bloodshed, but it was Obi-Wan who provided the next destination as he repaired the broken holo projector, and they saw Jabba being coerced by Maul. The Jedi followed the trail to Tatooine, and deciding to land by the road to the palace, Obi-Wan could sense a darkness that he had not felt in a decade. Though his first instinct was to move to his lightsaber, he realised that these were his emotions taking over, and this situation called for patience. Walking the winding road to Jabba's palace, Obi-Wan knocked politely on the massive doors, and soon the eye stalk of the TT-8L photoreceptor droid protruded in front of them, then ducked back into its wall-mounted housing. The sliding gate slowly creaked upwards, and though light permeated through some of the arched orifices, the ominous situation cast a shadow over the light. As the Jedi walked down the steps to the throne room, they saw Jabba on his throne, gazing gormlessly in their direction, but even by Jabba's standards, he was too still. As soon as this thought entered their minds, the body of Jabba flopped to the floor, and the trapdoor to the Rancor pit opened. Jabba's corpse partially filled the gap, and on his throne sat Maul, with his leg raised in a display of confidence and authority. The Zabrak taunted Obi-Wan by reminding him of his duel with Qui-Gon on this planet, and having waited a decade for this moment, he would have his revenge for the years of suffering and the denial of an opportunity to grow even stronger under Sidious. The three combatants all ignited their lightsabers, and Maul leapt at them both with a scream of fury. Though Maul had not fought a Jedi since his encounter on Naboo, the Jedi were pushed back by the weight of his strikes, and as if the situation was not alarming enough, Grievous now entered the fray. The Jedi realised that this battle was not in their favour, so Voss lifted the body of Jabba into the air, clearing the opening to the Rancor pit, and Obi-Wan force pushed Grievous into the gap. As Jabba's corpse provided a temporary seal to Grievous, the two Jedi could coordinate their attacks against Maul, but they were struggling to find an opening. So when Grievous punched a hole through the trap door, the Jedi thought it was a good time to leave, and using Jabba's corpse once more, they blocked the passage and returned to their ship. The exhausted Obi-Wan wondered if he should have faced Maul alone, and preyed on his weakness, which was his overconfidence, but he at least knew Maul was trying to establish some kind of empire, one far away from the Jedi or the Sith. Upon returning to Coruscant, the Jedi provide details of their mission to the Council, and Mace Windu and Ki-Adi-Mundi, who had traced Grievous's movements on Mygeeto, now believed that this was a different Grievous. The Jedi just engaged a second Grievous near the Prindar system, and this revelation brought mixed reactions from the Council. Turning to Yoda, the Grand Master stressed the gravity of the situation, but if the Republic were to secure victory, they could use the motives of Maul and this Grievous against the Separatists. Obi-Wan was unsure, as he knew Maul had a personal vendetta against him, and from what he had heard in their duel, Maul was only angry at Dooku for taking the place which he thought was his. The Jedi liked to keep this mission a secret, until Maul and Grievous became a legitimate threat, but across the other side of the city, one man had sensed this before Obi-Wan and Voss travelled to Tatooine. In one of the highest floors of the Senate office building, Chancellor Palpatine, otherwise known as Darth Sidious, was stood facing the window, with a view of the Federal District, and with his eyes narrowed, he thought about the disturbance in the Force. Sidious would have been impressed by Maul's ability to survive, had it not been overshadowed by the disgust of placing himself in such a position in the first place, and losing to a young Obi-Wan Kenobi. There was no doubt that Maul was growing stronger by the minute, and he would pose a threat when the Jedi had fallen, so he ushered for Masamida to bring his shuttle. Back on the world of Tatooine, Maul had freed Grievous after he defeated the Rancor, and on the console attached to his chair, he received reports from his Coruscant underworld spies that Sidious was on the move. Maul did not believe he was ready to defeat his master, so together with Grievous, they escaped to Dathomir to plan their next move with Talzin. Whilst they had some territorial control, they were still heavily outnumbered, but Talzin thought otherwise, as she had been experimenting with the limits of her magic. With the help of Old Daka, Talzin had successfully turned many of the dead trees and plants into terrifying spirits which could possess the most powerful of beings, and even created voodoo dolls, which required a lock of the hair of the victim. With the plans in place, Maul tasked himself with obtaining hair for the voodoo rituals, whilst Grievous decided to recruit more droids, but this time in the form of astromech and assassin droids. Using the Techno Union's droid factory on Mustafar, the cyborg was easily able to gain control, and changing the codes within the droids, he turned them into sentient beings under his command, before they were dispatched into the Confederacy's army. Grievous monitored the effect of these droids, whilst he continued to move around the galaxy and take over droid factories, and it was clear that these altered droids were diminishing Separatist forces. More advanced droids than the B-1 battle droid, such as the IG assassin droid, were also prepared for battle, and as Sidious was getting closer to finding Maul, Dathomir was ready for war. But one Night Sister was facing a dilemma. Having been assigned the task of killing Grievous, Asajj Ventress thought she would be eliminating a competition to be Dooku's favourite, but after witnessing the birth of a second Grievous, she realised that she could be expendable. Her doubts over her place by Dooku were soon compounded by one of Talzin's rituals on Dathomir, and in an effort to recruit any Night Sisters or Night Brothers off-world, Ventress felt the pull of her home planet. But thinking her presence would lead the Separatists to their location, she decided to take the option of highest risk and serve as a double agent for her sisters. With Dooku and the Separatist army now helping to track Maul, Ventress could not feed information directly to her clan, so she helped the efforts of Grievous to sabotage the droid army. Though she could not repeatedly fail her missions, whenever she encountered a droid factory, she would discreetly sabotage the manufacturing process, and this delayed the output of droids. On one of these missions to the world of Geonosis, Ventress encountered the Dathomirian Grievous, and she ignited her lightsabers with caution and suspicion, though the cyborg's instincts were to also reach for his lightsabers, as Ventress had been the one to injure him on Scipio. The Night Sister magic imbued by Talzin was preventing him from attacking another of his kind. The Night Sister was shocked to see a Dathomirian pendant, and this was definitive proof that she had not slain Grievous on Scipio, and Talzin was looking to be more active in the Clone War. Now that they were on the same side again, they formed a tenuous alliance to sabotage the factory, and Grievous was able to take and modify yet more droids, but the decreased performance of the droids and their production was spotted by one commander. Admiral Trench of the Harch species had been locked in a battle with his old foe Admiral Yularen when he noticed a small group of his B-1 battle droids were not carrying out his orders. When he examined the head of the droid, the programming had been altered to reverse its direction of travel, and this either led to firing at other droids or being easily picked off by opposing clone troopers. Trench was quick to contact Dooku, and the Sith ordered for an immediate inquest, and they soon discovered that this malfunction had leaked into almost all of their factories, which was a catastrophic disaster for their war effort. Dooku wanted to examine the damage for himself, and from his castle in Sereno, he took off from his landing zone in his solar sailor, unaware that he was being watched. To complete his mission and get a lock of hair for Talzin's ritual, Maul had gone to the most logical location for Dooku's hair, and when Dooku finally left his castle, the Zabrak was able to obtain Dooku's hair from his pillow. Then returning to his ship docked out of view, he told Talzin of his success. The clan leader told Maul that this was merely a backup to their real plan, and ordered for the real plan to be initiated, so it was Grievous who ordered for his galaxy-wide droid army to attack. In Dooku's solar sailor, the FA-4 pilot droid clicked into a bolt upright posture, and instead of maintaining the ship's path, it violently tilted downwards, whilst unleashing a hidden blaster pistol, and fired shots towards Dooku. The Sith was taken by surprise, and though he used the Force to deflect the shots with his hands, he couldn't prevent the ship from descending back towards the surface of Sereno, and he only partially cushioned the landing with the Force. When the dust settled, Dooku blasted his way out of his ship, and as he found the scattered remains of his pilot droid several meters away, he heard a group of clicks around him. The assortment of droids he used to defend his castle had switched their allegiance to face him, and reaching for his curved-hilted lightsaber, he saw his hilt had shattered in the crash. So as the droids moved and fired towards him, he unleashed his most potent lightning attack, fueled by the pain of his sustained injuries. As the droids all scattered into the distance, Dooku limped away from his castle to a hangar with Nantex-class starfighters, but he was stopped in his tracks by a red blade. Maul had waited for the droid betrayal, and when he saw Dooku crawling towards him, he took an opportunity he could not resist. Raising the Sith into the air, he taunted Dooku for not being truly imbued with darkness, and just to tool Insidious's machine, then pulling him towards his lightsaber, he impaled the Separatist leader. Across the galaxy, more and more droids started to turn against their masters, and the Separatist army was beginning to collapse as the Republic were rapidly sweeping across planets. In the Chancellor's office, Palpatine was concerned for the first time in his reign, and having sensed the death of Dooku in the Force, he activated the hologram of Grievous Mark II. The cyborg bowed to the foot of his master and dispatched him to track down Maul, while Sidious changed the communication code to find his clone commanders. Although much earlier than he'd intended, Sidious knew that this was the perfect time to execute Order 66. As the Jedi and the Republic were completing their victories, many of the Jedi across the galaxy were taken by surprise, with over 90% of the Order wiped out in moments, so it was up to the High Council and those of the Temple to save the fate of the Jedi. After witnessing the collapse of the droid army, Yoda contemplated if the clone army were similarly built machines, and now that reality had arrived. The Grand Master issued orders to secure the perimeter and to guide the younglings to safety through the temple hangar whilst he looked for Chancellor Palpatine. After entering into the chaos of the Senate office building, Yoda dispatched any of the Coruscant Guard that happened to be in his way, but expecting to see the Chancellor in his office, he is met by a completely empty area. Yoda is suspicious that the office was devoid of a fight, and even previous recordings on the holoprojector were erased, but as he was about to order a search for Palpatine, the holoprojector flickered into life. Anakin Skywalker, who had been aboard his Venator-class Star Destroyer with Ahsoka Tano, had sensed a change in his clones, owing to his close attachments, and did even manage to save the majority of the 501st Legion. Having confirmed the safety of Obi-Wan, He had wanted to see if his friend Palpatine was caught up in the melee, so was shocked to see Grandmaster Yoda. Anakin was shocked to find the Chancellor vanished, and he demanded for him to be found by the surviving Jedi. But having just witnessed the massacre of his order, he now decided to put the Jedi's priorities ahead of those of the Republic. Anakin was furious at the Jedi's reluctance, and considered this a form of betrayal, so he ordered the chip-free clone troopers to monitor clone chatter on other worlds, but help arrive from a different source. Having survived the chaos within the Senate office building, Padme had used her Royal Naboo security force to find out more, and her old friend Senator Rush Clovis was able to reveal how he had spotted Palpatine discreetly making talks with Lord Dodd before he left the building. Anakin was confused when he heard this news, as there was no reason to be talking to the Neimoidian amidst the chaos, so as he was in the colonies, he changed course for the Neimoidia system. What was a stronghold for the Trade Federation was now a scene of chaos, and the world of Cato Neimoidia was a towering cloud of smoke, so the Jedi landed on one of the Bridge City's spaceports. Moving towards the Great Vaults, the Jedi stopped in their tracks by Maul. The Zabrak had been searching for Grievous Mark II, or any remnant of the Separatist hierarchy, and when he saw the Jedi, he wanted to know where his other target was located, who was Obi-Wan Kenobi. The Jedi refused to tell Maul, but instead asked for the location of Palpatine, and if the Zabrak had kidnapped him. The disappearance of the Sith Lord was news to Maul, and leaving the stunned Jedi behind, Maul left for his ship. As the Jedi tracked Maul, the Zabrak was fixated on Sidious, who he knew was headed for Dathomir, and had trapped him into going in the wrong direction. So it was a rather tense Maul who arrived on Dathomir, and landing beside the Night Sister village, he saw Towsing calmly staring into a crystal ball, and with Maul's arrival, it was time to fight. As soon as this was declared, a Providence-class dreadnought loomed overhead, and the red mist turned to green as the Night Sister spirits were unleashed. Preparing their assortment of weapons, a squadron of droid gunships hissed when they landed in the jungle, then the battle begun. The Night Sister and Night Brother warriors supported the spirits to attack the droids, whilst Towsing formed a shield around the Dathomirians to protect them from harm, as Maul and Grievous lured out Palpatine and Grievous Mark II. The Sith Lord and his newest cyborg were a symbol of confidence, as Sidious declared that he would put them in their place. Maul and Grievous continued to stall for time, as Ventress snuck into Palpatine's shuttle and obtained a hair sample to take back to Towsing for a ritual. Upon a Dathomirian battle cry, Maul and Grievous ignited their lightsabers, and moving back towards the Night Sister village, Sidious's right knee suddenly collapsed, as Towsing used her voodoo doll, but this pain only infuriated the Sith, and lifting both of his opponents into the air, he repeatedly slammed them to the floor. This forced Towsing to stop her ritual, and pass the job onto the old Daka, and creating a sword from the Night Sister magic, she engaged with Sidious, but it seemed the Sith Lord was enjoying the fight. Just as hope looked lost, reinforcements arrived in the form of Jedi, after being alerted by Anakin Skywalker. The sight of Palpatine shedding his veneer of a benevolent old man and turning into an evil Sith fueled the pride of the Jedi and the shame of being deceived. The Sith was forced to fight with unrivaled speed, with Masters and Knights almost throwing themselves to defeat him, and he asked Anakin to help him as his friend. The distraction of the Jedi allowed Towsing to return to her ritual, and continuously stabbing the doll in different areas, Sidious let out a last mighty roar, with Maul in his proximity. The incredible roar of Sidious's attack was felt by the entire planet, and everyone in the vicinity was annihilated, apart from one. Through the layers of ashes and dust, a metallic claw grabbed the air with futility before clambering to the surface. General Grievous looked at the scattered bodies, and in particular the remains of his successor, then clambered towards the closest ship. Using the tools on board to repair the broken components, Grievous left Dathomir and travelled to the world of Kaleesh. Thanks to his ties with the IGBC, his home planet had recovered from their war, and with his work complete, it was time to become a Kaleesh again.